On behalf of we Brits, I would like to apologise to the American left for making your job that little bit harder. Rest assured, Bernie still would have won. Rest assured, he's still going to next year, if for no other reason than that you guys don't have to deal with Brexit. Brexit, okay, we got the policy wrong. However, it might as well have been custom designed to sink a socially democratic party dependent on, to invoke the usual archetype, socially conservative towns and liberal progressive cities, at the same time as ethnic minorities of all classes, the white working class and students and graduates. I would also stress that the left in Britain must not let our enemies erase the great success of the 2017 election, which proved that the radical left, having only had 2 years to try to make some inroads into taking over the Labour Party, was nonetheless able to achieve 40% of the vote, something very, very rare in British elections until very recently. But that said, an analysis of the psychodynamics of the appeal of Boris Johnson is certainly overdue, not least because we're about to embark on presumably 5 years of the guy. Boris Johnson and his team have shown that there is no low that they're not prepared to stoop to in order to win, but we knew this already. The real news of this election, the real new realisation, is that all wings of the establishment have shown that there are no legal, professional or social consequences for them doing so. When it's socialism versus barbarism, they've chosen barbarism. Everyone is a populist when they think their side is winning. Everyone is a misanthrope when they get disabused of the idea. In a tight election campaign, and you must remember that we Corbyn supporters have averaged one a year since 2015, one is disinclined to look the people squarely in the eye, and you certainly don't want to put them down on the couch. In the aftermath of a bad election like this one, it's tempting to simply be too disgusted and misanthropic to even think of doing so. But those of us who agree with the tenets of psychoanalysis must always say with Freud that a person is only ever a compromise of drives, that their love is also hate, that their repulsion is also desire, and that they love their neighbour as themselves only in the respect that most of us fucking hate ourselves. But understanding this needn't make us misanthropic. As Freud himself concedes, it hasn't stopped human beings creating wonderful shared projects in their politics, great selfless achievements of group beneficence. What we do need to understand, however, is that any time the left has managed to get consent to provide anything on universal grounds, it has done so in the teeth of the insight of a folk tale that Slavoj Žižek is fond of telling us. A man was travelling through a forest one Christmas Eve when, in the hollow of a tree, he encountered a magical fairy. The fairy, emerging from the tree, offered to grant him any wish. Now this man was struggling to pay his tithes, his wife was ill, his children ill-clothed and poor, and immediately his mind started racing at the gold and the food that he could wish for. However, there is one catch, said the fairy. I will grant you anything, but whatever you wish for, I will deliver to your neighbour twofold. The man paused for a moment and replied to the fairy, take my eye. The simple insight of this story is that the left must have nothing to do with the Rousseauvian populism that imagines that the people are good, well-motivated and pure of heart in themselves. Liberation means everything for everyone, whether or not they deserve it, and whether or not getting it, and their neighbour getting it too, will make them happy. In Other People's Politics, Populism to Corbynism, available now from Zer0 Books, I argue that the success of a figure like Donald Trump or like Boris Johnson is not so much that they, as they would claim, say what everyone else is thinking, that everybody is secretly racist and sexist and therefore votes for them. Rather, a claim that Even the people who don't think they agree with these right-wing figures nonetheless can, on some level, enjoy the performance of unlimited indulgence and enjoyment and desire that such figures put on. I claim that we need to think of populism not so much as in the classical definition that populists speak on the people's behalf. Rather, I suggest that we need to think that populists desire on the people's behalf. My own desires are incoherent, always frustrated and confused. The porridge is always too hot or too cold. But this guy, he seems to be getting it just right. The gamble of Corbynism was that, unlike our anemic centrist rivals, the radical left could compete with the right-wing performances of racist and sexist desire by offering in their place ones of shared generosity and enjoyment. The gamble was that policies like a 4-day working week and free broadband were, in their way, just as scandalous to establishment norms as anything being offered on the right. The second gamble was that the new mass movement inspired by Jeremy Corbyn personally could make being on the left seem like a thrilling, jouissance-laden, transgressive activity in itself. This would still be my analysis of what worked so well in 2017. I think it explains the fact that, unlike the 2010 defeat and unlike the 2015 defeat under more centrist leaderships, this defeat bequeaths us nonetheless an active, politically articulate and committed and unified mass young left. And here comes apology number 2, if you want it. The Leave voters in the North and in the Midlands who rejected Labour and rejected Corbyn because they perceived that we had become too much of a Remain party, they were utterly justified. Of course, we hear the argument that if Labour had gone the other way and had been more concertedly Leave supporting, we would have lost our liberal Remainers in cities and so on. Okay, I accept that. However, all things being equal, a socialist party should not have sided with the anti-democratic demand of its mainly middle-class Remainers instead of the democratic demand of its mainly working-class Leavers. It's as simple as that. But all that said, as much as I attribute our defeat to this pincer movement of Brexit, that does not mean that we can say, okay, there won't be Brexit next time and therefore we needn't worry. There will always be something. Jeremy Corbyn was a saint. Jeremy Corbyn was as hard as nails, and Jeremy Corbyn must go down in the history of the international left as a hero. However, if one thing stands out to me now about his presentation, is that he always framed Labour's policies, and always framed these are not Labour's policies, they are the policies of the radical left. He always framed them as being principally about doing good to the weakest among us. He wanted to save those disabled people who have seen their benefits cut. He wanted to rehouse the homeless. He wanted to end food banks. The problem is that those people who are not the weakest in society were able to look at what was being offered to them as well, free childcare, cheaper rail travel. They were able to look at that offer and to see that on some level for Corbyn it was only an excuse for doing even more good for the other, for the weakest. Under that circumstance, and faced with that offer, too many people were able to respond to Corbyn, take my eye. Psychoanalysis could have told us that the problem with doing good is most people don't think it's very good. In order to succeed, the left is going to have to find other affective registers to deal in, other ways of soliciting desire. We can do it, we're going to do it, and now, alas, we have time to do it.